Hey there, everyone. It's Irene Lyon. If you are watching this right now, you're most likely watching the recording on YouTube or Facebook. And as these live streams always work, it takes a second or two for people to find me. So I'm going to just make sure all things are running smoothly here. And had a little glitch with Facebook. So I had to restart the computer and do all those sorts of things. So I'm here live, and it is the 17th of December, 2020. Looks like people are coming on, and it's nearing that time of the end of the year where we transition over to a new calendar, 2021. It's been a very fascinating year, hasn't it? Hope wherever you are, whenever you are listening to this, whether it's today live or tomorrow or 10 years from now, if this exists in 10 years, you're doing well. I'm seeing some people pop on. Hello in the comments. Hey, Elizabeth. Hello, Miyoki. And it looks like sound is loud and clear. Thank you, Crystal. So first off, I'm Irene Lyon. If you are new to me, thank you for being here. Might have some of our old veterans from my programs, such as Smart Body, Smart Mind, and the 21-day nervous system tune-up. Maybe some up-down workshop participants are watching this. So whoever you are, thank you. If you're brand new, I try to do these once a month. We've been in a good rhythm, I should say, over the past year. We've been doing these live streams, special topics, sometimes Q&A. We've been doing monthly drop-in classes, which is a paid class where we get together and do basic nervous system awareness work. I've got the final drop-in class of 2020 coming up on Saturday. So I'm going to do a little housekeeping first. Saturday, the 19th of December, is the final online drop-in class of 2020. If you haven't come to one of these classes, please do. They're $19, 1 hour long. It's less about theory and more practice and application. And what we're going to play with this Saturday, in addition to basics of orienting, connecting to the environment, following the breath, not changing the breath, all the basics of nervous system, kind of like in some ways it's the Holy Trinity, right? Orienting, following impulses, connecting to the environment. We're going to follow those, but we're also going to connect to the elements of the earth. So earth, wind, water, fire, and ether. And I've done versions of this past year, so I thought for a final class of 2020, let's get back to the basics. Our basics and kind of those constants that are always here for us, right? The land, the water, the air, the wind, the sun, which is the fire, and just the energy force that kind of bathes all of us. It's very Star Wars. So we're going to get into that on Saturday. And then my team and I are going to take a bit of a break from about the 24th to the 3rd of January. So we won't be posting a lot here or on Instagram or anywhere else. And then we'll be back in the new year. And it'll be very soon after that, after the new year comes, to start with Smart Body, Smart Mind, my 12-week online program. So if you don't know what any of this stuff is and you're new, be sure to check it out. Head to my site. We run online programs once a year, a big one called Smart Body, Smart Mind. And it's going to be a good one this year. I can feel it. It's going to be the 10th time we have run this program. So it's not my first rodeo, not my team's first rodeo. We've done this program, as I said, 9 times. Thousands and thousands of people all around the world, over 60 countries have gone through this program. It's a very unique, potent, transformative way to learn how to become your own medicine and to really get into really what I would call the meat and potatoes, or the language of your nervous system. And speaking of which, we'll get into the topic today. I think we're all good, so I'm going to hide my phone so I don't see messages coming in. Thanks to everybody who's here saying hello. I'll just make a little note here. Well, we've got Scotland and New Zealand. I'm sure we have some people from the US, Canada, all over. Thank you for your hearts and wishes. And as I mention resources, Crystal, my assistant, is going to pop them into the comments. If you're listening to this on YouTube, anything I mention, whether it's a resource, a program, another video, a book, whatever it might be, will be in the comments of the YouTube section. I'm going to take a little bit of tea here. All right, so today I want to talk about feeling and the importance of real feeling for real healing. Bit of a rhyme. It's quite a simple concept. And I'm going to share some stories. I'm going to share, obviously, some of the theory, and I'll take your questions, and that's how we're going to end this year, this special topic. So I have a note here because I didn't want to lose track of where I start. So in order to understand what deep feeling or real healing is, and real feeling, it's kind of hard to get those correct, real deep feeling. So if we think about our inability to feel deeply and to process the deep feelings, and when I say feelings, I'm going to make that also mean sensations, emotions, internal stuff that we sense in our physiology, all the emotions, anger, joy, sadness, fear, disgust, surprise. Those are like the basic core 6 mammalian human emotions. Then we've got, side emotions from that. Grief is one that's a big one. Kind of the sense of listlessness, what we consider as sadness or depression. I mean, there's just, all you have to do is look up human emotions and they'll give you more than the 6 I've just mentioned. But if we really, when we get really good at listening to our internal sense, the deepness of our organs and how we feel, it really comes down to those 6. And there might be variations of them, but those are the main ones. So the question is why do we lose that capacity to connect with those feelings, sensations, emotions? And by the way, a lot of time we think that emotions are in the brain. We interpret them through this thing that is this crazy computer that we have encased in our skull. But when we get into this work, when we really work at the somatic nervous system level, you start to realize that these emotions, these feelings are actually in the physical body. So take a second, if you're watching this, which you are, if you're listening to me right now, to take your hands and just touch. It could be your arms, it could be your chest, it could be your belly, it could be your backside, right? It could be the area where the lungs are, the digestive organs, liver, kidneys, all of that. So our sensations, our feelings, our emotions are encased in our physicality. So that's like point number 1. And so often we try to figure out our emotions by thinking about them. And this was a common thing I would see in private practice, or even when I would be in my group work, doing group work with people when I teach my movement work, is you might ask somebody, what are you sensing? And we could play with this even right now. And the person might, you can tell because they start to look up. It's like the system is searching for a construct in their mind, in their thinking, in their past higher brain level to describe what they're feeling, but they're not dropping into the body. It's like they're searching, and I'm not an expert in reading body language per se, but when you watch experts who are body language experts, they can look at the eyes, the facial expressions, the gestures, the pause. They can see the heart rate go up because the carotid artery starts to bounce faster, the flushness of the face. All the stuff will indicate where a person is going when they're speaking due to their language, and also how they're trying to recall information. But when we are really connected deeply with our somatic selves, our viscera, the movements of our body, we don't need in the same way that cerebral recall, because we're going inside. So I'm going to just start with that. The second thing is often, again, when I've been in workshops and classes and teaching and in private practice, there'll be often this need to close the eyes and sense. And there's nothing wrong with that, because what's happening is there's this wanting to shut out the external world of stimuli so it's easier to sense internally. Nothing wrong with that. And a lot of our mind-body practices ask us to close our eyes and go inside. Nothing wrong with that. But when we reserve that kind of introspection, that checking in with our introception, and we only do it when we close our eyes and it's really quiet, what do you think that means? It means that when we're out in the world, when we're driving, when we're walking down a street, when we're doing work like this, I mean, you pick whatever it might be that you do in a day-to-day world to connect with the environment. If we have to stop every moment and close our eyes to feel what we're feeling so that we can go on to the next step, A, we're not going to get very far. Can't do that when you're driving. You can't do that when you're parenting. You can't say to the child that is screaming because they've just broke their arm, hang on a second, honey, let me just center myself and let me wait to get guidance on what to do next. It doesn't work that way. And that creates misattunement, right? It doesn't have to be that child example. It could be anything, right? So I'm kind of going around my first point here, but feeling comes from the internal. The reason why we lose this deep feeling is it gets bleached out of us very early in life. So we first have to understand, why can't we feel? And so if I was to pose the question to all of you right now, can you remember a time back in the day? It could be yesterday, it could have been 10 years ago, it could have been a year ago, it could have been 50 years ago, where you remember, like in your cognitive mind, having to not express what it is that you were sensing inside. Think about it. And if you want, you can share in the comments and I'll read some of them out. Right? So I want to be a little more interactive today with you guys if I can. So can you think of a time where you knew that you had to stop feeling, or you felt something and you shut it down? I mean, I just gave you that example of the little person who just might have broken their arm and they want to express something, and then mama's there having a meditative moment to try to ground herself. If that child isn't addressed very quickly, they will start to figure out a way to either, of course, go into over activation and over arousal, hyper arousal, because someone's not attuning to them, and so they're going to get even crazier. Or what is often what occurs is they'll start to shut down and they'll see, wow, this parent of mine is not here for me. I better deal with this fight flight energy. And they're not even thinking about this at age 5. They're not thinking cognitively, I have to shut down what I'm feeling with this broken arm. They're not thinking that. It just happens automatically. It's a survival response, right? These are survival energies. I talk about survival energies: fight, flight, freeze. You break an arm, you're in terrible stress. It's a shock trauma. Your system has to protect the pain and it has to get help. If it doesn't get it, we very quickly start to learn how to shut down. And that's okay, because that is a process to preserve and protect. But if that is how we have to live most of the time, let's say, I'm going to use this example. Let's say, again, parents don't know how to deal with their own emotions, and so when they see a crying child that's hurt or scared, or there's monsters under the bed and they don't know what to do about it, they disallow that little human who's pretty raw and pretty amazing. They disallow that little human from expressing and feeling. So this is one way that we start to stop our deep feeling. That makes sense? So as we stop that, we stop connecting to our body, and as we stop connecting to our body, we turn off its natural organic medicines to process and get that, let's say, emotion out. I'm going to look to your comments in a minute, but one of the things I think of often is, when you go, remember when we used to go to movies? I haven't been to one in a few months, but you know, you're in a jammed packed movie theater and you're watching a really sad scene and the tears start to come. And I am guilty of this from my 20s. I remember you would like kind of hide that you were crying. You know, you kind of like pretend something was in your hair, you know, and as you did that, you wiped the tear away, or you don't want to blow your nose fully because you don't want to show that you've got snot run under your nose because you're crying so damn hard, right? If we are finding ourselves shutting that down in those situations, I understand that makes sense because it's not culturally acceptable usually to just break down in a movie theater. However, if you've ever been to a comedy, right, think about this. I've been to some pretty funny movies in a movie theater. Nobody holds back the laughs typically when it's something funny. But if something is really, really sad, usually we don't show the tears. We don't have this mass cry fest in like the cinema. If it's horror, people might go, right? They might gasp because it's so automatic, right? Something happens, you know, the ghost comes up or whatever, everyone jumps. You see it happen, it's automatic. But there's something about certain emotions, especially sadness, anger also, where we tend to suppress it. Now, typically in a movie theater, we usually wouldn't get angry because it's just not the way it works. But sadness is a big one, surprise is a big one, fear is a big one, and joy and laughter is a big one as well. So let's just transfer that. I'm going to get to your comments in a second. If you transfer that into your own house, you know, and you're watching a show, and listen, are you finding yourself suppressing the natural reaction that wants to come out? It's just something to pay attention to, right? Are you feeling yourself go into that wired pattern of shutting down those emotions, even in the comfort of your own home? Isn't that kind of interesting? It's not strange to me, it's just how we've been programmed to not let that out. If you watch something funny when you're at home, are you allowing yourself to laugh out loud, literally? You know, are you allowing yourself to talk to yourself and say something that connected you with that show, that movie? Are you with a partner? And are you finding yourself not emitting the full emotions because you're afraid of what they're going to say? And all of this is determined by how we were allowed to express when we were young. Were you allowed to express and put out that scream, that yelp, those tears, that I don't understand why that happened in the movie, Mom? Like, or was it just shut down? It's like, oh, you don't need to know that, honey. So I hope I'm making sense. I'm giving you these little vignettes of how we might, as adults, be still living in that wired pattern from when we were young of not being allowed to express the visceral qualities that we're feeling, because those are our feelings, those are our emotions. I'm going to go one more step here with the movie piece. If you want a great movie to watch, I just watched it a few weeks ago or a week ago. Captain Fantastic. Crystal, can you pop that in? Captain Fantastic. It's a great movie. Children raised in the woods. I won't give you the story. Then they had to leave for a certain reason. And when those kids are singing and with the dad around the fire, you hear the little ones yelping and screaming. And it's just this joyous occasion. You're just seeing this natural emotion and emitting. It's something that we rarely see in Western society. We might see that in tribal culture where there's lots of singing and drumming and stomping and all these things. And then, of course, as Westerners, we have to then learn how to express our sound, how to let the tears go, how to get the healthy aggression out. And that's, of course, what I teach and we do here in my work, is we get those impulses out. So great movie, highly recommend watching it. The other thing I'll mention is play with this emoting piece. So if you know you're someone who shuts down the emotions when something sad comes on a television show or a movie, can you work with expressing that? You know, if you're walking out in the park one day and something makes you sad and you see someone walking towards you, are you hiding the tears? Are you pretending that you're all together? Can you just let the tears come down your face, and if they see them, they see them? Is that so bad? right? They actually might give you a dose of empathy if they see that your eyes are red and you've had some tears come out of your eyes. I'm thinking about the last time, not the last time, but a few years ago, I was on an airplane a few times over the year, and for whatever reason, all the movies that I kept seeing were real tearjerkers. You know, one was, I think, Spotlight, which is just a crazy, you know, not documentary, but biopic. Won't give you the story, but you can look it up. Spotlight. One was called Room, which is again very traumatic and tragic. Just really intense visuals and storylines. And I remember just saying to myself, I'm just going to let myself cry. And I did. And I breathed deep. And I had a stranger next to me, and they didn't care. I don't even know if they noticed, right? But to be able to just let that out is super important. So, in order to understand this concept of deep feeling, so that we can get to deep healing, we have to kind of investigate, why have we stopped feeling deeply, and is it still programmed in us to suppress that feeling? So I'm going to go to the comments here, you guys. Hello, hello, Brazil, Connecticut, England, Texas, Germany. Hey, Mason. Yeah, nice point on eyes open and closed. It'll be good to try to build my capacity with my patients and myself. Yeah, Mason, actually, if you don't know Mason and Chelsea, I did an interview with them. They are good friends of mine. They're naturopathic doctors in Ontario, Canada. We did a video interview with them. But yeah, like if you are working with people, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a massage therapist, a doctor, you know, you have to be able to internally go into your emotions, your feelings, your sensations while interacting, because it's what we feel in our body that allows us to feel other people. If we have to, again, you know, I'll use that example, say, just a second, you know, Susan, I know I need to talk to you about your medical problem, but I'm just going to close my eyes and wait. That doesn't go well, right? But we have the ability to have that with eyes open. We just have to bring it back and cultivate it. Think about children. Before they start to emit and emote their exuberance or their sadness or their anger, they don't close their eyes, go inside and go, okay, this is how I want to express, right? They just express it. So very important to cultivate this eyes open quality. And if you've been following me for a while, this is where that orienting, remember you guys, the orienting response, the ability to exploratory orient, not just when things are stressful, but when things are good, and to pause and look and see and sense and feel while feeling internally, also sensing and seeing the external. Because here's the thing, when we have had traumatic stuff happen to us, when we were little, when we're, you know, last week, whenever, that connection to the environment gets screwed up with, right? It gets a little jagged. And so part of the process of bringing back our nervous system back online, the health of our nervous system back online, and connecting to the body is connecting with the environment. The whole mind-body concept, I think, is broken a little bit, because the mind and the body are intimately connected to what's occurring in the environment. So if we're shutting out the environment while we're working on the mind-body connection, we're missing not even half of the picture, we're missing the whole picture, right? We cannot be human without an environment. We need it. And so we need to connect with it with eyes open. Nothing wrong with closing our eyes, but cultivating that is often a game changer for people. One person says connecting to the breath is very useful. It is. Breath is very, very important. And we also have to make sure that we're not using the breath to bypass what we're feeling. So this is great, because your comments give me ideas here. So if I think about private practice, watching people in group sessions, often when I was in private practice, we'd work with a table. So a person would lay down on a massage kind of table, and I would do body work. Or if I'm teaching in group, people would be in a group laying down, and then I'd guide them through movements. I would say 9 times out of 10, maybe even like 9.9 times out of 10, someone lies down in that position. There's a script written in our Western society that as soon as I do that, I have to start breathing differently. I have to change my breath in order to feel my body. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I will sit and follow my breathing, track my breathing. This is what one does potentially when they're in a certain type of meditative practice. Maybe you're in a warm bath and you just feel your breath and you notice it. But we also want to be able to listen to the body and listen to the internal system without changing the breath. Because sometimes breath can be used to skate over, to bypass, to jump over the tough stuff that's in our system. So sometimes when I would work with a person in private practice and I would notice they're going into a very deep, uncomfortable feeling, and then all of a sudden they start controlling the breath. Now, if you do not have the skills yet to be with that intense emotion, anger, sadness, whatever, even maybe joy, fear, then breathe. Better to breathe and stay connected to the breath than dissociate or go into more hyperarousal. Or if you're a parent and you know your temper is short, better to breathe than hit your kid, right? Better to breathe than hurt someone in the public. And if we go to this next level, which is what I'm all about, can we feel the internal and grow the capacity and actually have our breath stay the way it needs to be for that emotion? So if we think about fear, the breath is going to stop a little bit. It's going to hold. When I've worked with people who are recovering from medical trauma and anesthesia trauma and near-death experience traumas, there's a moment where the breath almost stops. The breathing becomes really shallow. I'm kind of slowing my talk down so that you feel that. It's the system getting ready to die. True story, right? The system is getting ready to die, to pass over to the other side, to numb out because of the blood that's being lost or the pain or the attack or the sexual assault or whatever it is. The system is getting ready to die. And so when we get into this deeper work and we start wanting to excavate those trapped fight flight impulses that have kill energy in them and deep fear and deep terror, there's actually a moment where I will encourage someone, please don't take another breath. I won't even say please. I'll just say, don't breathe deep. Let your breath be shallow. Track it, stay connected to the environment, feel where you are, and by matching that shallow physiology, it's going to actually pierce into that somatic trauma that got stuck in the system and isn't getting processed. And I hear so many stories of people who are doing, very good breath work and trying to move traumas out of the body by having very structured breathing practices. Nothing wrong with a breathwork practice, but when it comes to these deeper pieces of trauma, we have to match and enter into the physiology that was there at the point of injury, at the point of traumatic event, at the point of terror, fear, whatever it is. Hope that makes sense. So Darius, thank you for that, because connecting to breath is very useful, and we need to connect to it in the way that it wants to be. If I came across someone on the street and they had just been attacked and they're freaking out, I might say, hey, what would it be like to just breathe out and slow down? Because there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're not in that acute state, right? When we're an adult and we're going in to do this work consciously, we want to do this work, we want to play with letting the physiology do what it wants to do. Okay. Carol says, yes, I can remember very well. I'm assuming you mean shutting down your feelings. I had to shut down my intuition, feeling something just isn't right. Yeah, well, our intuition is deeply 100% connected to our viscera, to our body, to our cells. Our intuition isn't something out there, it is in here. And then when we have it connected to our system, to our viscera, the nervous system is electric, and it is with that electricity of the nervous system, it then connects to the outside world, right? This is how when we're really connected and we think about someone, all of a sudden they call us, right? That's not, in my opinion, coincidence. It's that deep intuitive connection to self, and let's just say that other person. Okay. Jacqueline said, yeah, dissociating when Dad was trying to teach me and got frustrated with me for not getting the lesson. Yes, that is a very common one. My husband actually has a story about that where he would be doing his math homework at the kitchen table, and his father was very smart with math, and he would yell at him over him and just yell at him if he wasn't getting things right. That's going to put a child or a teenager into a fear response, right? And they're not going to be able to learn. And then we wonder why they can't get the math equation right. It's because they've got this fight flight reaction, probably verging into freeze, and then that shuts the cognitive centers down, and then they can't learn. They don't retain it. So yes, Debbie says, all the time I'm shutting down my sensations. I was disallowed as a child and carried it to adult life and wasn't attuned to my children. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Debbie, and being honest. It's true. Again, one of the common things, so again, if we go back to the theme today, right, real feeling means real healing, or deep feeling means deep healing. It can go either way. A lot of the questions my team and I get are, how do I prevent my children from, or how do I prevent my children from getting traumatized because of my trauma that I'm carrying, or I know I've traumatized my kids, or I've misattuned with them, or I didn't securely attach with them because I didn't know. The person usually wants to know, how can the kids be helped? How can I fix the child, the teenager? And the answer always comes back to the person. It's like you have to work with yourself. By working with yourself, because you are bonded to that soul, that human child, even adult child, teenager, whatever, it indirectly and directly impacts them. The moment your system changes and your ability to feel, even if they don't know you're doing anything specifically, they'll feel it. They'll know that something's changing in mom or dad. And you don't even have to tell them. I think we overtell sometimes our young ones what we're up to. But if we're just energetically changing because we're doing this work and we're allowing ourselves to feel more of us, they'll pick up on it without us telling them what's happening. And that is the real juice, when we see a natural shift in that interaction without having to sit a kid down and say, okay, X, Y, Z, A, B, C. It just naturally starts to occur. Leslie said, my mother was mentally ill. It was like talking to a wall. I had this from the age of 5 years old, probably before. Yeah, if a mama was mentally ill, that was no doubt there, usually before a child would be born. Typically, not typically, but sometimes, often, postpartum depression is something that occurs when a baby is born. And of course, so there's all the hormones and all that stuff, but if the mother hasn't known, sometimes they have no clue, or they haven't worked with their own early trauma, the fact that maybe they were not securely attached to or attuned to when they were an infant, and then they have this brand new infant, it will flood them back with all the old somatic traumatic memories and all the misattunements that occurred before they could even think or speak. So yeah, this stuff is sticky. It travels with us until we actively and consciously make a choice to change it, which is what you guys are all doing here today. I actually, Leslie did a good article or vlog on this. I'm gapping on the title of it. It was not too long ago. Crystal can pop it up. It's where I talk about a book called Travels, and I talk about postpartum depression. I talk about surgical trauma and birth trauma. It's a longer video. Crystal's about 30 minutes long. I would recommend watching that. It's a good one. Hey there, Katie, one of our SPSM students. You say, yes, of course, I had to shut down because as a little girl, I saw my parents often sad and unhappy, and that made me feel like I do not deserve to be happy myself because they were not happy. 100%. You know, and here's the thing, like, Katie, you're older, so you know the language to say, I saw them sad and unhappy, therefore I knew as a kid that I didn't deserve it. Usually when we're 2, 3, 4, 5, the word deserve doesn't come in. It's a sense, it's a feeling, it's a visceral quality. So we see their body posture, we see their sadness, their anger, their disagreements, whatever it might be. And so what happens is we then internalize it. This is how children can sometimes look exactly like their parents in terms of their body posture, facial pieces put aside, right? But the way that the shoulders are held, the way that the tailbone might be tucked under or hyper erect, with kind of a hypervigilance, eyes popping out of the head because of an intense fear response, all these things. So this is how offspring sometimes gain the same look and characteristics of the parent. It isn't necessarily totally genetics, it's the modeling that transfers into that little human, is just watching and like, oh, well, this is how it must be, so I'm going to be that way, because by being that way, we then stay safe, right? If you have parents, will rarely happen, but if you have two parents that are very sad, very depressed, fighting all the time, I mean, I don't want to say it's impossible, but it would be very tough for a little human who's being raised in that environment to be exuberant and confident and all these things. You see it sometimes when the child has a nanny, or the child is looked after by a grandmother or an older sister, right, that kind of protects them from that. I've seen that even in my own friend circle, where my friends got the brunt of the bad stuff because they were older, and then they protected their sibling from it, and they didn't allow them to be impacted by that toxicity. That's common too, right? And so we'll see these sort of different ways that children are raised based on who their primary caregiver is, because it isn't always the mom or the dad. So thanks for that comment. That offered us a little more insight here. Just going to my notes. I think we're doing good. Let's just keep going through these comments because it's giving us some good information to riff off of. Braden says, yesterday I teared up. I teared and covered up watching a movie. So the next time, Braden, tear up and see if you can just let those tears flow down your face and blow your nose and let it all out. Lynn said, crying as a child and the parent saying, I'll give you something to cry about. Yes, that was a very common one, wasn't it? Child is upset, child is hurt. For whatever reason, they start to cry, and the parent immediately invalidates that organic feeling. How many people have had that happen? I'm lucky I didn't have that so much at all in that respect, but I saw it at other people's houses. I heard it from my private practice. So the moment anyone, it doesn't even have to be a parent, imagine if you are in a relationship and you are tearing up, or you're upset about something and your partner immediately says, stop crying, it's not that bad. It's like, well, that's your interpretation, but my interpretation is I'm in a lot of pain right now. I'm in a lot of emotional pain. We want to see how, even as adults in our relationships, how are our partners not allowing us to be who we are. Often it's not because they're trying to be vindictive and mean to us. It's just because that's how they were taught. They were probably the kiddo that had a parent tell them, there's nothing wrong, like don't cry. And so it just gets transferred. It's never questioned, right? It's never questioned. And so then it just gets put on to our partners, our spouses, our children, gosh, even our pets. Don't get me started with what I've seen with pets and owners not allowing their animals to sniff. They're out for a walk, animal needs to sniff, and they're just yanking them on the leash, like getting them to go faster. That animal is sniffing for a reason. It's part of their DNA, right? They're doing something that is innately curiosity driven. That's what they're doing. So when we start to understand this organic need of mammals, we start to see it in lots of different places, not just with humans. Okay. Aisha says, I think I'm learning how to feel. Awesome. Last week after a big trigger, I spent an afternoon shaking in bed and had lots of crying. Wonderful. Right? Isn't that crazy? Like back in the day, that would be seen as weak and like, don't do that, like you're wasting a day. But at this point in time, we need to do this, because not only is it allowing you to process that trigger, that's taking toxicity out of the environment and out of the world. You guys make sense of that? So if we are holding in emotions, if we're holding in the need to be in bed and cry or whatever it might be, think about this. Each of us is an organic being. We are a cell of this planet. When the cells are holding in toxicity, it makes the system toxic. It's pretty cut and dry, right? So, not to put everybody on the spot here, but as we become more aware and awake to the importance of working with our body, we have to almost pledge an allegiance, if you will, with ourselves, with our inner core, to know by processing this, I'm actually helping everything outside heal, not just myself, right? For some people, that's too much of a responsibility. For other people, that actually gives them more permission to let out. They're like, okay, well, by letting these tears out, I'm actually helping my children heal. I'm helping my plants heal. I'm helping the world heal, right? So there's this way that we can kind of twist it in a positive way that's like, oh, well, these tears and this night of just being a complete mess is actually a really good thing for the planet, right? So we have to kind of look at these from different perspectives sometimes. Carol says, I used to suppress it. I don't anymore. Awesome. Hey, Michael. So glad to get this refreshed. Okay, you're welcome. Cool. The movie is up there that I mentioned. So Jackie says, I currently live with someone that thinks emoting equates to mental illness because of the power dynamics in the situation. I cannot allow my emotions to be seen in his presence. Previous roommates screamed threats at me when I expressed health needs that were inconvenient for them and living in functional freeze because I fear the same of losing my housing when expressing my needs and emotions. So this is a tricky one, Jackie. If you have to stay with these individuals or person in order to stay housed and safe, then you have to obviously weigh out what is more important. So the question is how can you, in safety and in comfort and in solitude, whether it's in the bathtub, whether it's in the shower when the shower is running, whether it's when you're out for a walk, whether it's whatever it might be, how can you still process those emotions so they're coming out for your system and stay safe in relationship to these individuals in your life? That would be what I would suggest. So how can you continue to express and emote in a way that's safer so that you're not being tormented by these folks around you? Of course, at the end of the day, if you can shift and change that environment, I would recommend it because it is tough to be who we are when our expressions are seen as bad and wrong. And so see if there's a pattern in your history that was the way. I don't want to make a guess or an assumption, but I'll make a hypothetical guess that probably there was a time earlier in life where that was also the case. And so now there's a mimicking of that wiring in the system. And this is very common. We will we will find ourselves unconsciously in situations that mimic exactly how we grew up. And that's okay. This is what's so interesting about the human. We have the capacity to be like Pavlov's dog, to be very conditioned and engineered because of just how we are. But then we have also free will and this ability to break out of those patterns because of our higher brain, right? So that the animalistic, that autonomic nervous system conditioning actually can keep us in those wired patterns that we grew up with, because even though that was unsafe, I'm kind of going more off on a general speaking term here. Like if it was safer to not feel, so if we come back to the topic of the lecture, if it was safer to not feel, which means we're not healing and we're not repairing, it actually will seem easier for us to stay in that paradigm when really staying in that paradigm is unsafe for us. And when we find safety, real safety as adults, it can feel confusing, gross, and disgusting because it's completely opposite to what we were wired into growing up. And so part of this work is recognizing that when we dive into this, it might feel really uncomfortable, like the kind of uncomfortable where spiders are crawling all over us, right? It's just this icky, something's not right. I got to change, I got to stop. And this is where we'll see people fall off the wagon when they do this work. It gets so different and so opposite to what they're used to, even though what they're used to wasn't good for them, that they'll flee from healing, they'll flee from health. So thank you for your comment, Jackie. I wish you well. I'm sure everyone here sends you a lot of good energy to shift and change the situation, even if it's so that you can get some of your own emotions out in a safer space. Monica says, is it normal to laugh while you're in therapy? Sure. Yeah, it can come out. Laughter is a natural emotion. Laughter can also be, I've seen in the past, a way of hiding fear. It can be a way of expressing energy that is safer than, say, showing anger, right? So again, this is from what I've seen in private practice and just being around a lot of people. Sometimes you'll meet folks who have a laugh that if you really listen or you look, it's verging on terror. They kind of have scary eyes and a scary mouth. It isn't a joyous belly laugh because you're watching a really funny comedy. It can sometimes be, and I'm not saying this is you, Monica, by any means. I'm making more of a general piece here. Sometimes you'll hear a laugh or you'll see a laugh, and if you look really closely at the micro expressions, there's terror in the eyes. And that terror is very fleeting and very quick, but then it shows me that, oh, this person found a way to protect expressing their deep emotions through comedy. I think there's no coincidence that a lot of the famous comedians that we've all loved and cherished have had supreme trouble with addiction and drug abuse and alcoholism, right? They're funny for a reason. I'm not saying that all comics have got dark, traumatic pasts, but they figured out a way to be comedic-like and funny as a way to suppress the painful stuff inside. Comedy is changing a little bit right now because we're talking about more real-life events. But yes, all in all, there's nothing wrong with laughing in therapy. The question is, where is the laughter coming from? Why is it there? Is the therapist allowing you to do it? And can they pick out the subtle micro pieces that might be showing something else that needs to come up and bubble out? Okay, let me just look at my notes, you guys. Your questions are great. I think I've covered a lot already. So the one thing I will say, and then I'll get back to the questions and the comments, is that when we enter into this work, and I hope you do, it's more than just me talking and giving you these pieces of education, like real practical deep work that we teach and I teach in the programs that I run. There'll be these moments where, I'm going to restart this. Sometimes we think that in order to heal old traumas that are really bad and nasty, or a lifetime of small insidious ones, that we have to have these huge cathartic, whole box of Kleenex, sessions. And sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to get some intense energy out. Sometimes we need to, as someone just said, cry for an entire day or afternoon, or heck, even a week maybe. Think about this. If you were never allowed to fully cry every time you scraped a knee, hurt yourself, got scared, thought monsters were in the closet, it might take some time to release that energy and feel like, oh, I can let this out, right? So the tiniest things might upset you, right? You might break a mug that's not that special, and like a coffee mug, and you cry for like an hour, and it makes no sense. It doesn't equate to breaking that mug, because you can go and buy another one from Starbucks whenever you want, for example. But those little things can open up old memories, old pains, old times where we didn't get to cry. Maybe you were that kid that when you did break a glass of milk on the floor, you were scolded and you were put to your room, and you didn't know why. You didn't know that that's what happened when you dropped a glass, because it's never happened before. right? And so as an adult, and this is just a total, random example, you might break that glass, or you might break something in your kitchen, and this crazy intense reaction comes out and it doesn't make sense. And you might not even remember that when you were little you broke a glass and you got in trouble and you were told to stop crying, or whatever. And that's okay. But it's like if something is coming out and it's a deep feeling, let's go back to like the real deep feeling, that is an opportunity to really be with that. Take away the construct that says this is crazy, it's just a coffee mug that broke, why are you overreacting? Let yourself feel what's there and process it. Doesn't mean that each time you break a coffee mug you're going to go into that reaction, but if you feel that energy bubble up and you stop it, it'll be there waiting for the next time when maybe you, I don't know, break something else, or the next time you get in an argument with someone or something, or you do something that is wrong, that isn't life or death, but it causes a spark of that old feeling. So we're not always necessarily going to remember all the things that stopped us from feeling deeply, but as adults, so from here on forward, watch for the moments in your day where little things, not necessarily big things, where little things spark up things that just don't make sense. And this is where we have to trust in the magic of the nervous system, that we are emoting and emitting for a reason that has nothing to do with breaking that mug, right? Right now, in our current world, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stuff and stress going on. There's just so much. I mean, I don't have to speak about it. You all know what's going, there's just so much going on. So much energy, so much uncertainty, so much confusion, so much fear, lots of polarization. And that's all fine. We'll just put it over there. But there might be lots of emotions. There might be frustration. There might be anger. There might be sadness. There might be terror. If we can use this current moment to feel deeply and know that by feeling deeply, not only are we processing the current stuff, we're processing all the past stuff. That has nothing to do with the current moment necessarily, right? So there's these ways that we can kind of have these entry points to heal stuff without me sitting down therapy style and being, okay, tell me about the most scariest time when you were 5, right? That kind of way of working I find is less organic. So while here and knowing what you know now and learning from me in this work, the more we can build that capacity to be with the current moment, learn how to orient and get into the practices. What comes up becomes medicine, even if we don't know why it's coming up. Okay. Brienne, your question's a little long, so let's see if I can read. I think I might have answered this, but you said, it's a question about feeling your body during the self-hold exercise and dealing with any feelings of aversion to sensations that come up while doing the exercise. So this is an exercise that I teach in my 21-day nervous system tune-up. I also teach it in my Smart Body, Smart Mind courses. It's also a common energy exercise where you contain the body, but it doesn't have to be here. It could be holding anything. It's about containing. So you notice that when I breathe in, I can both see and feel my body expanding. However, inside my body, most noticeably in my throat, chest, and heart, and all the way down to my belly, is a feeling of gripping, squeezing, and contracting. The sensations feel very unpleasant. I don't know how to feel without reacting with aversion to them. So the first word that comes to me, Brienne, is practice. And here's the thing, I'm not sure if you're in one of my programs or if you're using that exercise just as a single exercise or tool. Not all the things that I teach work the same way on different days. So it's a tricky one to articulate. So the self-hold can be a great way to just connect and come back to the body, but we have to discern, we have to temper it. So it might be that the self-hold is not what one should do, rather to just feel the gripping and the squeezing. Does that gripping or squeezing need to do something else, right? It could be, sometimes people will find this is too constricting and it's claustrophobic. So when you notice that there's something going on in the throat, chest, heart, and there's a gripping, it's possible that that gripping is a holding of something old that needs to move out in the form of sadness or anger or fear or terror or disgust. And these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. Know that that self-hold exercise is not everything. It's one thing. And it could be that it's not the right thing to do. And this is where I'm not someone that likes to say, when you feel this, do this. When you feel that, do that. It creates confusion, because then we start to prescribe certain things based on what we sense. Where one day connecting to the ground and orienting might be wonderful for an uncomfortable feeling, but the next day it doesn't work, right? And the thing is this is where we have to go deep internally and listen and learn to listen and practice asking the system, what does it need? What is the image that's coming up? What is the sound that needs to be made? What is it that needs to occur differently? So I would say that there's nothing necessarily wrong with what's being felt. The question is that exercise actually still useful, and does something need to shift? And then the aversion is an interesting word. Again, maybe there needs to be going into them more. And again, this is where we're kind of dabbling with consult language right now, because I don't know your history. I don't know what programs you've done or haven't done with me. But standalone, just using the self-hold is okay. And there's more to it. And so sensations that are unpleasant, and sometimes we have to feel them to the point where we're dry heaving, right? Where the disgust is really coming out. And again, this goes back to that sense of we tend to as humans try to get rid of the stuff that feels yucky, that feels gross. And really, when we have had especially a lot of toxic shame growing up, disgust and being grossed out is actually a very important emotion. Disgust is one of the key emotions to feel, to move out that toxicity that we endured growing up, for example. All right. What time are we at? We're just past 1 Pacific. Okay. I am going to, the longer ones I'm not going to get to you guys, so if you have a longer based question, what I would suggest, 2 things. One, if you haven't started with my online courses, please do. I say that with full sincerity. There needs to be dedicated practice with this work. And most of the questions that we get, they're all valid, and they all point to doing the basic work. When we can do the basic work and we can understand how the physiology works and understand the basics of connecting to self and the environment and bringing them all together, a lot of these things fall into place. I used an analogy on something the other day. Maybe I'll share that as an ending point. But whether it's chronic, I saw someone mention migraines, whether it's a chronic illness, whether it's having trouble setting boundaries, whether it's an overactive nervous system that doesn't let us to sleep, all these things are connected to a very similar thread, and that is dysregulation in the autonomic nervous system, which then funnels out and impacts, depending on our system, depending on our history, depending on our genetics, it impacts different things, right? But the main beginning point of really understanding deep healing and this deep feeling is understanding how these systems work, what they are, how they get shut off, and how to re-engineer the system to feel again. Okay, someone asked, what is anesthesia trauma? So it's kind of what it says. So when we go under for surgery, it is a traumatic event. It might be essential to fix a body part or have a surgery or save our lives, but we do die a little bit when we go under anesthetic. It is a true letting go of consciousness. And sometimes, depending on the way that we go in, if we go in with a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty and a disconnection from the body, and let's just say the surgery is very intense, sometimes people do wake up during surgery. I mean, so there's all sorts of different scenarios here. Basically, trauma at this anesthesia surgical level is when the system is still stuck in that anesthetic state, in a sense. And so people will have had, let's say, surgeries when they were really young, and their system has maintained a little level of shutdown since then, even though they're like 65 years old. And so by working with that surgical event, with what was going on, you can actually break apart the chemicals, really, that are still embedded within the system. And often when you work at this level, you will smell the anesthesia come out of the person, even if it's like 80 years later. So true. It's very, very true. But I'll say, and the way in which we work with that, while there are some specified versions of working with that one-on-one, we still work with that in my online world the same way as if someone had a car accident trauma, a physical assault, a sexual assault, abuse, verbal abuse, toxic shame, attachment trauma, birth trauma. Even with all these different ways in which we are put into dysregulation, we start at the same way. But that, in a nutshell, is surgical anesthesia trauma. Lynn says, crying learning timetables. Is that why I'm so bad at math? Why I am so bad at math now? Very possible. There's an overcoupling there, no doubt, right? Like if we were learning when we were young and we were stressed and we didn't resolve that at that physiological level, which, let's face it, most of us have not, learning as an adult is going to feel terrifying. And I think that's why a lot of people don't start this work. I'll be really honest. Because to do the work that I'm offering and that my team and I do, it's not, you're not coming and laying down and I'm not putting my hands on you and healing you like that. I don't necessarily believe in that level of healing. It can happen. And what we need to understand is that if our learning environment when we were growing up, and it doesn't have to just be school, it could be, were you allowed to climb trees? Right? Were you allowed to play on the play structures without being told that you were going to hurt yourself? Were you allowed to explore your body when you were an infant? Or were you swaddled all up and put in devices that disallowed your ability to move your limbs freely and explore and move? Right? We know that crawling is super important for learning and learning how to read and all these things. So if we were restricted in how we learned from infancy to now, and you know you've been wanting to do this work, or maybe you've started it but you just can't keep going into it, and there's a resistance, there's a procrastination, chances are there's some really important juice in that resistance and that procrastination that ties back to a learning environment that was unsafe and wasn't fun and that was riddled with terror and just stress. Yes, okay. Is it true that cortisol is released through tears? Fiona, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to ask my colleagues. I've never heard that before. Possible. It's possible. There's a lot we don't know about our system and how it chemically works. I think we can all probably agree with that. All right, let's see. You guys are really chatty today. Thank you. I'm going to come to a close right now. We've linked up some important things. So if you do have a question that wasn't answered, number one, if you can, start learning through my resources, through my programs. We have a Facebook group called the Healthy Nervous System Revolution Facebook group if you haven't joined that. join. You've got to answer a few questions just so that we know that you're real human. But one of my colleagues is in there answering questions on a weekly basis. We are going into a mini break starting on the 24th to the 3rd of January, so we might be a little less in there, but if you do have a question, you can ask there. If you do join the 21-day nervous system tune-up, we have our own private Facebook group for that course, and you can ask questions around your process and healing at that level. And as I said, most of our answers come back to regulation. They come back to learning how to connect to these somatic feelings, these emotions, the organs, the viscera. We are always coming back to that basic core element of, are you able to be in the present moment, connecting to your environment, connecting to the ground under you? Are you able to notice how you breathe, how you change your breath? Of course, in the offerings and the programs, we get into more movement practices, we get into more intention, more visualization, more education, more video trainings. There's a lot more to this than what you're obviously seeing here with me, which I probably think you could understand that to go deeper, we need to be in a more sort of structured space, right? So while there is no formula per se, there is kind of a formula that then trickles out to provide the foundation, for your system so that it can start to bring up and out what it needs to. The more capacity we have on board to be with our system, the more that unconscious system will go, this my system, my person is learning, is growing capacity. This means I can start to bubble up these old traumas and these old emotions that have been suppressed for so long because it was never safe to do so. So please know that too, that the more we get into this work, the more we start to practice, it opens up the gates so that these things can come up and out. The stuff doesn't heal with time alone. It's very different than having a cut on your finger and it just healing naturally on its own. There is a complexity with our higher brain, with our conditioning, with our animal self, and of course with the higher human soul, if you will, that requires a little more padding, a little more investigation, a little more learning. So thank you everybody for being here. The next session for Smart Body, Smart Mind, Michelle, if that's what you're talking about, is starting in March. It's going to be around the first week of March. We're going to start the 10th round of Smart Body, Smart Mind. This is my 12-week group online program. We've been running it. We've run it 9 times for over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. If you want to start now, however, and you don't want to wait until then, which I actually recommend, start with my 21-day nervous system tune-up. That is a self-study course. It's been curated from Smart Body, Smart Mind. And it's a good way to just get the wheels turning, get the basics on board. And we have found that people who've gone through the 21 days, when they get into Smart Body, Smart Mind, there's just a little more solidity there, a bit more capacity, because the 12-week course is an intensive course. There's a lot going on there. So I won't go through all the details. Go to my sites, check them out, read, learn. Have a wonderful rest of your year. And remember, come back to the body, come back to the feelings, let the emotions out. Don't question anything that is coming up and out of your body. It will start talking to you when you start listening to it, but if you do not listen to it, it will not talk to you, right? So we have to break that cycle of it not talking to us, in a nutshell. All right. Love to everybody. We'll talk to you later. Bye for now.